Captain Tejo gripped the metal rail of the bridge as the Defender shook violently. Through the massive viewport, he watched Research Station Omega-12 tear apart like a child's toy. Metal beams twisted and snapped, sending debris spinning into the dark void of space. The explosion lit up his weathered face in orange and red flames. "How many people were on that station?" he asked quietly. 3,000 scientists and their families." "Sir," Lieutenant Haywan replied, her voice barely a whisper. Tejo closed his eyes for a moment. That made it over 50,000 innocent lives lost in just 2 weeks, all because of the thing floating out there in the wreckage. The Warbeast moved through the debris field like death itself. Its body stretched nearly 100 meters from head to tail, covered in thick black armor that looked like it had been forged in the depths of hell. Massive tentacles, each one thicker than a battleship's hull, swept through the scattered remains of the station. But it was the eyes that haunted Tejo's nightmares. 6 burning red orbs that seemed to look right through him, filled with an ancient hunger that no living thing should possess. "Admiral Kongmin, to all ships. The CUM system crackled to life. This ends now. Battle Formation Delta 7. Throw everything we have at this monster." Tejo wanted to protest, to tell the Admiral that they had already tried this approach 5 times before. But orders were orders. He turned to his weapons officer, Commander Ji-ho, a young man whose hands shook every time he looked at the creature. "You heard the Admiral? All weapon systems online?" "Sir, with respect," Ji-ho's voice cracked. "Our previous attacks only made it angrier." "I know, Commander. But we can't let it reach Colony 7. 2 million people live there. The Coalition. Fleets spread out around the Warbeast, like hunters surrounding a wild animal. 12 heavy cruisers, 36 destroyers, and over 100 fighter craft all focus their weapons on one target. It should have been enough firepower to crack a moon in half. All ships, fire at will." Admiral Kungman's voice echoed across the fleet. The void erupted in brilliant light. Plasma cannons fired streams of superheated energy that could melt through solid steel in seconds. Quantum torpedoes streaked through space, each one carrying enough destructive power to level a city. The new reality-warping bombs, humanity's most advanced weapons, tore holes in space itself. Every shot found its mark. The Warbeast disappeared completely behind a wall of explosions and energy beams. The bridge crew of the Defender held their breath, hoping against hope that this time would be different. But as the smoke and energy dissipated, their hopes crumbled to dust. The creature floated unchanged in the center of the destruction. Not a single scratch marked its black armor. Worse yet, it seemed to have grown larger, its tentacles now stretching even further than before. The red eyes burned brighter, and when it opened its massive maw, the roar that emerged shook every ship. "In the fleet?" "Impossible," breathed Commander Ji-ho. "Direct hits from reality-warping bombs, and it doesn't even have a scratch." Lieutenant Haywan's voice cut through the stunned silence on the bridge. "Sir, energy readings from the creature are off the charts. It's like our attacks are feeding it somehow." Tejo had suspected as much. Every battle, every weapon fired at the beast, only seemed to make it stronger and more aggressive. It was as if the creature literally fed on violence and hatred. Growing more powerful with each act of war directed against it, the Warbeast turned its massive head toward the fleet. And even across the vacuum of space, Tejo could feel its malevolent intelligence studying them. Then, with movements that seemed impossibly graceful for something so large, it began moving away from the debris field. "Sir, it's changing course," reported Navigator Minho from his station. "New heading is—" "No, where?" Tejo demanded, though he already feared the answer. "Colony 7, sir. Direct approach vector." The words hit the bridge like a physical blow. Colony 7 was one of the most heavily populated worlds in this sector. Families, children, elderly people who had fled there seeking safety from the Outer Rim conflicts. They had maybe 6 hours before the creature arrived. All civilian transports in the Colony 7 system. Admiral Kungman's voice carried the weight of desperate authority. "Implement emergency evacuation protocols immediately. This is not a drill." Tejo watched the Warbeast glide through space. toward its next target. Behind it, the wreckage of Research Station Omega-12 continued to burn, a testament to the creature's unstoppable power. The beast had already destroyed 6 colonies in 14 days. Each time, the pattern was the same. It would appear without warning, ignore all attempts at communication, came and systematically tear apart everything in its path before moving on to the next target. The worst part was how intelligent it seemed. This wasn't some mindless animal acting on instinct. The creature planned its attacks, targeted the most vulnerable points of each colony's defenses, and seemed to take pleasure in the destruction it caused. As the Defender and the rest of the fleet began their pursuit, Tejo couldn't shake the feeling that they were witnessing the end of everything they had built among the stars. The creature was unstoppable, and with every failed attack, it only grew stronger. He looked out at the vast emptiness of space and wondered if this was truly how the galaxy would meet its end. The transport vessel Hope's light shuddered as another engine sputtered and died. Dr. Sujin felt her daughter. Boar's small body pressed closer against her as the ship's artificial gravity flickered. Around them, 50 other refugees from Colony 7 sat in cramped rows, their faces pale with exhaustion and terror. "That's the 3rd engine in 2 hours," muttered old man Hien-Wu from across the aisle. His weathered hands gripped a small photograph of his grandchildren who hadn't made it to the evacuation ships in time. Su-Jin closed her eyes and tried not to think about the chaos they had fled. Colony 7's evacuation had been a nightmare of screaming sirens, overloaded transport ships, and families torn apart in the panic. She had grabbed Biora and run for the nearest ship without even packing a bag. Her husband Jae-sung was supposed to follow on the next transport, but that was before the communication blackout. Biora hadn't said a word since they left the colony. The 9-year-old girl just stared out the small porthole beside their seat, watching the stars drift slowly past. Her dark eyes held a sadness that no child should ever carry. Sujin remembered how her daughter used to laugh and chatter constantly, always asking questions about everything she saw. Now, silence had become her shield against a universe that had become too cruel to understand. "Mama, look," Biora whispered. Suddenly, her first words in 3 days, Sujin followed her daughter's gaze through the porthole. In the distance, she could see the lights of other refugee ships scattered across the darkness like lost fireflies, converted for evacuation duty. Others were cargo haulers with people packed into spaces meant for supplies, all of them fleeing from the same nightmare that had consumed their home. The ship's intercom crackled to life with Captain Dongsu's tired voice. The old transport pilot had been flying rescue missions for 30 years, but even his steady nerves seemed frayed now. "Folks, I'm going to level with you. We've got some mechanical problems that are worse than I first thought." A woman in the front row started crying softly. Her baby had been fussing for hours, sensing the fear of all the adults around him. Sujin wanted to comfort her, but she barely had the strength to hold herself together. "How bad is it, Captain?" called out Engineer Wu Jin, a middle-aged man who had been trying to help with repairs. "Bad enough that we're not making the rendezvous point with the main fleet," Dongsu replied honestly. "I'm doing everything I can, but we might be stuck out here for a while." The refugees exchanged worried glances. Everyone knew what being stranded meant. The Warbeast was still out there somewhere, hunting down the scattered evacuation ships like a predator picking off wounded prey. They had all heard the radio transmissions before the communications went dark. Ship after ship calling for help, then nothing but static. Bora pressed her face against the porthole, her breath fogging the glass. "The stars look different here," she said quietly. Sujin looked out at the alien constellations. They were in deep space now, far from any inhabited system. If their engines couldn't be fixed, they would drift here until their life support failed, or something worse found them. A sudden bang echoed through the ship, followed by the whine of dying machinery. The lights flickered and went out, leaving them in darkness except for the emergency strips along the floor. Several passengers gasped in fear. "Engine failure complete." Captain Dongsu's voice came through the intercom, stripped of its usual calm confidence. "We're dead in space, folks. I'm sorry. The silence that followed was deafening. Then someone started to sob, and soon, half the passengers were crying, or praying, or both. Children clung to their parents while adults stared at each other with the hollow eyes of people who knew they were going to die. Su-Jin pulled Biora closer. Feeling her daughter's steady heartbeat against her chest, at least they would face whatever came next together. She thought about Jae-soon and wondered if he had made it off Colony 7 alive. She hoped he would never know what happened to them out here in the endless dark. Then Biora stiffened in her arms. "Mama," she whispered, pointing at the porthole. Through the small window, a massive shadow was approaching. At first, Su-Jin thought it might be a rescue ship, but as it drew closer, she realized with growing horror exactly what they were looking at. The Warbeast emerged from the darkness like something out of humanity's worst nightmares. Its enormous body blocked out the stars, tentacles as thick as subway tunnels, writhing with deadly purpose. The creature's black armor caught the light from their emergency systems, making it look like a demon forged from space itself. Passengers throughout the ship began screaming when they saw it through other portholes. Some prayed frantically while others simply stared in paralyzed terror. This was it. This was how they would die, torn apart by the monster that had already destroyed 6 colonies. But Biora didn't scream. She didn't even seem afraid. Instead, she pressed her small palm against the cold glass of the porthole and did something that made Su-Jin's heart skip a beat. She began to hum. It was a gentle melody that Su-Jin recognized immediately. Su-Jin used to sing it to Biora every night. Before bed, a simple lullaby about stars dancing in the sky. Her daughter's voice was soft and pure, cutting through the chaos of terrified voices around them like a single candle flame in a storm. Something impossible happened. The Warbeast, this unstoppable force of destruction that had laid waste to entire worlds, began to slow down. Its massive head tilted to one side, as if it was listening to something it had never heard before. The writhing tentacles gradually became still. "Why isn't it attacking?" Su-Jin whispered, hardly daring to breathe. Biora looked up at her mother, and for the first time in days, there was something other than sadness in her dark eyes. Wonder, understanding, a connection to something vast and mysterious. "It's lonely, Mama," she said simply, and somehow, Su-Jin knew her daughter was right. The silence inside Hope's light was so complete that Su-Jin could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Everyone held their breath as the Warbeast's enormous claw approached their tiny ship. The appendage was easily 3 times the size of their entire vessel. It's covered in black armor plates that looked like they could deflect a nuclear blast. Su-Jin instinctively pulled Biora closer, expecting the crushing blow that would end there. Lives in an instant. Round them, passengers squeezed their eyes shut or whispered final prayers. Old man Hyen-Woo clutched his photograph so tightly his knuckles turned white. But the death blow never came. Instead, the massive claw touched there. Whole with the delicate care of a surgeon handling a newborn baby. The ship barely shuddered as the creature's appendage wrapped around them. Not crushing, but cradling, like a parent protecting something precious. "What's happening?" whispered Engineer Woo-Jin, his voice barely audible. Through the porthole, Biora found herself staring directly into one of the beast's enormous eyes. Up close, she could see it wasn't just a burning red orb. There were depths there, layers of color that shifted like liquid fire. But more than that, there was something unmistakably alive and aware looking back at her. The eye was easily 10 times larger than Biora's entire body, yet somehow it didn't feel threatening. It reminded her of her old dog Max, the way he used to look at her when he was trying to understand something she was saying without thinking. Biora placed both her small hands flat against the cold glass of the porthole. Her palms barely covered a fraction of the window, tiny and fragile against the vastness of space and the creature beyond. The response was immediate and miraculous. One of the beast's smaller tentacles, still thicker than Bora's entire body, slowly approached the porthole from the other side. With incredible precision, it positioned itself so that its tip was directly opposite her hands, separated only by the thin barrier of reinforced glass. "Incredible," Su-Jin breathed, her scientific mind racing even as her mother's heart filled with wonder. Every military force in the galaxy has tried violence against this creature. Plasma cannons, quantum bombs, reality-warping weapons, but she's showing it kindness. Captain Dong-Su had abandoned his pilot's seat and was now pressed against the main viewport, staring in disbelief. In 30 years of flying, I've never seen anything like this. It's like watching a lion play with a kitten. The moment stretched between girl and beast, connection forming across species, across the impossible gulf between tiny human child and cosmic destroyer. Biora could feel something stirring in her mind. Not quite thoughts, but emotions. Curiosity. Loneliness so deep, it made her chest ache. And underneath it all, a desperate hunger for connection that had nothing to do with violence or destruction. Then the spell was broken by the sharp whine of charging weapons. Coalition fighters burst. From behind a nearby asteroid field, like angry wasps, their sleek holes bristling with armaments. Squadron leader Park Jin-woo's voice crackled over the emergency channels. Civilian transport. Move away from the hostile, immediately. We have lock-on, and are preparing to engage. The effect on the Warbeast was instantaneous and terrifying. The creature's massive body went rigid, tentacles coiling defensively around itself, and the hopes light. The gentle eye that had been studying Bora with such curiosity now blazed with the familiar rage that had destroyed 6 colonies. A low rumble emanated from deep within the beast's body, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the ship's hull and into their bones. "No!" Biora shouted, the word exploding from her with such force that everyone on the ship turned to stare. "Ease" were her first words in months, and they carried the authority of someone far older than her 9 years. She lunged for the communications panel, her small fingers dancing over controls that were meant for adult hands. "Please don't shoot," she called into the cum, her voice high and clear. "You're scaring it." The response from Squadron Leader Park was immediate and incredulous. "Scaring it, little girl. The thing has killed thousands of people. Move away so we can destroy it before it kills you too." Captain Dong-Su stood frozen between his young passenger and his duty as a coalition citizen. He stared at Biora in amazement. "Child, that creature destroyed 6 entire colonies. Millions of people have died because of it, because everyone tries to hurt it first." Biora replied, her voice carrying a simple truth that cut through decades of military protocol and fear. "Look at it. Really look. It's not trying to hurt us. Just wants someone to be nice to it for once." As if responding to her words, the Warbeast's grip on their ship gentled even further. The tentacle that had been pressed against the porthole began to glow with a soft, pulsing light that seemed to come from within the creature's body suddenly. Images began flashing in Bora's mind. Not her own memories, but someone else's. Something else's. She saw vast laboratories filled with alien technology. Scientists in strange robes working over a massive tank filled with green fluid. Inside the tank, something was growing, being shaped and molded by machines that sparked with unnatural energy. The pain was overwhelming, wave after wave of agony, as the creature was forced to become something it was never meant to be. More images flooded her consciousness. The creature, fully grown, being forced to fight in gladiatorial arenas for the entertainment of beings that looked nothing like humans. Electrodes attached to its head, delivering punishment whenever it hesitated to kill. The desperate loneliness of being the only one of its kind. Created as a weapon but yearning for companionship that was always denied. And then, the worst memory of all, standing over the ruins of worlds it had been forced to destroy, looking at the bodies of innocent people and feeling their fear and hatred washing over it like acid. Every act of violence making it stronger physically but weaker emotionally, till all it knew was rage and pain, and the terrible isolation of being the most feared creature in the galaxy. Tears that streamed down Biora's face as the visions ended. She pressed her palms harder against the glass, wishing she could somehow reach through and comfort the massive being that had shared its deepest pain with her. "It's been hurt so much," she whispered, her voice breaking with empathy that seemed impossible for someone so young. "It doesn't know how to be gentle because no one ever showed it how. Every single person it's ever met has tried to kill it, or use it as a weapon. It doesn't even remember what kindness feels like. The Coalition fighters circled like predators, weapons fully charged and targeting systems locked on. But Biora ignored them completely, focusing all her attention on the enormous eye, watching her through the porthole. "I won't hurt you," she said softly, speaking to the creature as if it were a frightened animal hiding under her bed. "Nobody else has to hurt you either. You don't have to be alone anymore." The Warbeast's response was a sound unlike anything the refugees had ever heard. Not a roar of rage or a cry of pain, but something that could only be described as a sigh of relief that had been held back for centuries. The bridge of the Coalition, flagship defender, had never seen anything like it. Admiral Kungman stood, with his arms crossed, watching the most dangerous creature in the galaxy float peacefully alongside his ship, while a 9-year-old girl prepared to make contact with it. Every instinct he had developed over 40 years of military service screamed that this was insane. "Admiral, with respect, this is completely against protocol," Captain Tejo said quietly. "We should be evacuating that child, not putting her in more danger." "I know, Captain," Kongman replied, his weathered face showing the strain of making an impossible decision. "But look at the readings. The creature hasn't shown any aggressive behavior since the girl started communicating with it. For the first time in 2 weeks, it's not attacking anything." Dr. Sujin checked her daughter's environmental suit one more time before the launch bay doors opened. The protective bubble that would carry Biora into space was the most advanced piece of technology the Coalition had ever built, designed to keep diplomats safe during first contact situations. She had never imagined it would be used by her own daughter to talk to the galaxy's most feared monster. "Are you sure about this, sweetheart?" Sujin asked, trying to keep the fear out of her voice. Bora nodded, her small face serious beyond. "Her years? Honul is waiting for me. Mama, it's been alone for so long." "Honul?" Sujin blinked in surprise. "You've already given it a name?" "Told me its name," Biora explained matter-of-factly. "It means sky in the old language. Chose that name because it dreams of flying free among the stars instead of fighting all the time." The launch bay doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing the vast creature floating in the void beyond. Up close, it was even more massive than the sensor readings had indicated. Its body stretched nearly 200 meters from end to end, covered in armor plating that seemed to shift and flow like living metal. But what struck everyone watching was how still it was. No writhing tentacles, no aggressive posturing. It simply waited, as if it understood that something important was about to happen. Biora's protective bubble drifted out of the launch bay, propelled by tiny thrusters that moved her slowly toward the creature. The bridge crew watched in tense silence as the distance between girl and beast closed to just a few meters. "My papa taught me about animals," Biora said, her voice carrying clearly through the cum system. He said, "Even the scary ones are just afraid sometimes. He used to take me to the zoo, and there was this big tiger that everyone thought was mean. But Papa showed me that if you're patient and gentle, even tigers can be friends." The Warbeasts. Massive head turned toward her, and one enormous eye focused on the tiny figure in the bubble. There was something almost gentle in that gaze now, so different from the rage-filled glare that had terrorized the galaxy suddenly. More images began flooding through the connection between Biora and the creature. The bridge crew couldn't see them, but they could tell something was happening by the way the girl's expression changed from wonder to sadness to anger and back to compassion. "What is it seeing?" asked Lieutenant Haywan, monitoring the brainwave readings from Bor's suit. "Memories," Dr. Sujin whispered, recognizing the pattern. "It's showing her its past." The visions were clearer this time, more detailed. Biora saw the creature's creation in the biolaboratories of the extinct Cathera race, a civilization that had vanished from the galaxy over 1,000 years ago. She watched as scientists in flowing robes worked day and night to craft the perfect weapon. It's combining the DNA of dozens of different species to create something that had never existed before. But it wasn't just the creation that filled her mind. She felt the creature's pain as it was forced to grow in artificial wombs. Its body twisted and enhanced until it became something that could survive in the vacuum of space and destroy entire fleets with its bare appendages. She experienced the torture of the training chambers, where it was conditioned to kill on command through a combination of genetic programming and brutal punishment. Most heartbreaking of all were the memories of the creature's early days when it still had hope, that its creators might show it kindness. She saw it trying to communicate with the Kithara scientists, attempting to form bonds with the only beings it had ever known. But they saw it only as a tool, a weapon to be used and discarded. They made it to fight a war, Biora said quietly, tears streaming down her face inside the protective bubble. But the war ended before they could use it. The Kithara all died from a plague and it was left alone. It's been drifting through space for centuries, not knowing what it was supposed to do. The creature's tentacles began to glow with the same soft light they had seen before, and Biora felt a warmth spreading through her chest. It was trying to comfort her, she realized. This massive being that had been created only to destroy was now worried about making a little girl cry. "You don't have to be alone anymore," Biora said. Reaching out her small hand toward the creature, the beast responded by extending one of its smaller tentacles, moving with incredible care toward her bubble. When the tip touched the transparent barrier, both girl and creature began to glow with warm golden light that seemed to come from within their very beings. On the bridge of the Defender, hardened military officers watched in amazement as the light pulsed between the two beings, creating a connection that transcended species and size and the vast differences between them. "Incredible," breathed Commander Jiho. "The energy readings are off the charts, but they're not violent. It's like they single quotes, talking. It has a name," Biora announced suddenly, her voice filled with joy. "Its name is Hanul, which means sky in the old Kithara language. It chose that name because it dreams of flying free among the stars instead of being used as a weapon." Admiral Kongman stepped forward, his expression a mixture of wonder and concern. "Child, how do we know it won't attack again? How can we be sure this isn't some kind of trick?" Biora turned to look at Hanul's massive eye, and a smile spread across her face. It was the first time Sujin had seen her daughter truly happy since her father's death. In a voice full of gentle authority that seemed to come from somewhere far beyond her 9 years, she whispered a single word: "Sit." The response was immediate and breathtaking. The enormous creature, this force of destruction that had laid waste to 6 colonies and countless military fleets, slowly settled into a peaceful position, its tentacles folded neatly around its body, like a cat curling up for a nap, and the aggressive energy that had surrounded it for so long simply melted away. The bridge crew stared in stunned silence as the most feared being in the galaxy obeyed a command from a little girl as if it were the most natural thing in the universe. Because Biora said, her voice soft but carrying clearly through the cum system, it finally found a friend. And in that moment, everyone watching understood that the galaxy had just changed forever. The morning sun cast long shadows across the construction site of New Colony 7 as massive steel beams floated through the air like feathers. Hanul's enormous tentacles moved with the precision of a master craftsman, carefully positioning each piece of the new hospital, according to the architectural plans displayed on floating holoscreens. "Lower section C7 by 2 meters, called out Chief Engineer Park from his safety platform. 3 months ago, he would have been screaming in terror at the sight of the creature. Now he worked alongside Hanul every day, marveling at how the being that had once destroyed entire cities could place a window frame with the delicacy of a jeweler. Setting a precious stone, Bara sat cross-legged on Hanul's broad back, her small hands resting on the creature's warm, living armor. At 12 years old now, she had grown into her role as the galaxy's first interspecies interpreter. The neural connection she shared with Hanul had deepened over the months, allowing her to translate not just the creature's thoughts but also its vast knowledge of ancient technologies. "Hanul says the Foundation needs to be reinforced with quantum steel mesh," Biora announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone far beyond her years. The Kithara used similar techniques when building structures that needed to withstand planetary bombardment. Engineer Park nodded and made notes on his tablet. The combination of human engineering and ancient Kithara knowledge had revolutionized construction across the Coalition. Buildings that had once taken years to complete now rose from the ground in weeks. Stronger and more beautiful than anything humanity had built before. From the observation deck of the nearby administrative building, Dr. Sujin watched her daughter work alongside her massive friend. The sight still filled her with wonder and a mother's natural worry. Bora had grown so much in these past months. It's not just physically, but in ways that sometimes made Sujin feel like she was looking at a stranger. The Galactic Council still doesn't trust it, she confided to Admiral Kongmin, who had become a regular visitor to the colony reconstruction sites. Ambassador Chen keeps filing reports about the potential security risk of allowing Hanul access to Coalition infrastructure. Admiral Kongmin chuckled. It's a sound that would have been impossible 3 months ago, when he was preparing for humanity's final battle against an unstoppable monster. Ambassador Chen hasn't spent time with them like we have. He sees only data, reports, and classified files. He doesn't see this. He gestured toward the playground area where a group of refugee children had gathered, around one of Hanul's smaller tentacles. The creature was carefully manipulating a complex puzzle made of interlocking metal pieces, each movement precise and gentle despite the appendage being larger than the children themselves. "Higher. Make the tower higher," laughed little Minji, a 6-year-old whose parents had been lost during the original Colony 7 evacuation. She had been scared and silent when she first arrived at the refugee camp. But now she climbed fearlessly onto Hanul's tentacles and treated the massive creature like the world's most interesting playground equipment. Hanul's response was a low, melodious hum that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. The sound had worried Coalition scientists at first, thinking it might be some kind of weapon charging. But Biora had explained that it was laughter, the creature's way of expressing joy when interacting with the children. They will understand. Eventually, Kungmin continued, watching as Hanul carefully lifted Minji high into the air while she squealed with delight. That little girl has shown us something we forgot in all our years of warfare and expansion. Understanding is stronger than any weapon we've ever built. The afternoon construction shift was winding down when Hanul's massive head suddenly turned toward the horizon. Bara felt the creature's attention sharpen through their mental link, and she immediately knew what had caught its interest. Transport. "Ships incoming," she announced. 3 heavy cruisers and a diplomatic vessel. Anul can sense the fear from some of the passengers. Sure enough, within minutes, the ships appeared as dots in the sky, growing larger as they approached the colonies. Landing platforms. These would be the monthly supply runs bringing new refugees and Coalition officials who were still adjusting to the reality of working alongside the former terror of the galaxy. Biora slid down from Hanul's back, using a rope ladder that the construction crew had installed for her convenience. She had learned that new arrivals were less likely to panic if Hanul appeared to be working rather than simply looming over the colony. "Time for the friendly giant routine," she said with a grin. Patting one of Hanul's massive claws, the creature responded by carefully picking up a piece of decorative metalwork designed for the new school building. To the incoming passengers, it would look like Hanul was simply another piece of construction equipment, albeit one that happened to be a living breathing being larger than most buildings. As the ships landed and their passengers disembarked, Biora watched their faces go through the familiar progression of emotions. First came the fear as they spotted Hanul in the distance. Then confusion as they realized the creature was working peacefully alongside human construction crews. Finally, wonder as they saw children playing nearby without any sign of concern. That evening, as the twin suns of the Colony 7 system began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Hanul settled into its favorite resting position near the colony's central plaza. The creature's massive form cast long shadows across the newly built structures. But instead of the terrifying silhouette that had once filled nightmares across the galaxy, it now looked protective, like a guardian watching over sleeping children. Biora climbed up to her usual spot on Hanul's head, where she had built a small platform complete with safety railings and weather shields. It had become their evening ritual, sharing the sunset and the peaceful sounds of the growing colony below. "Sing with me," Biora said softly, beginning the gentle lullaby that her father had taught her so long ago. Hanul's deep, resonant voice joined hers, creating a haunting harmony that drifted across the settlement like a blessing. Windows opened. As families paused their evening routines to listen, children stopped playing to look up at the massive creature, and the small girl silhouetted against the colorful sky. The sound was nothing like the terrifying roars that had once announced Hanul's arrival at doomed colonies. This was the song of contentment, of loneliness finally ended, of a being that had found its place in the universe, not as a weapon of destruction, but as a protector and friend. Dr. Sujin stood on her apartment balcony, tears streaming down her face as she listened to her daughter's voice blending with that of the creature that had become family. She thought about Jae-soon and wished he could see their little girl now. It's teaching the galaxy that even the most fearsome monsters might just be lonely souls waiting for someone to show them kindness. In the end, the greatest threat to galactic civilization had been defeated not by weapons or armies, but by a 9-year-old girl who understood that sometimes love is the most powerful force in the universe. The end.